It was a week that began with Donald Trump dumping his fiercely loyal campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski. Then came the federal filings showing that Trump raised just $3 million last month compared to $26 million for Hillary Clinton, and he had just over $1 million in the bank while she had $40 million. And the two nominees in waiting blistered each other in speeches, Clinton unloading on Trump's economic policy, Trump on Clinton's foreign policy.
We can't let him bankrupt America like we are one of his failed casinos. We can't let him roll the dice with our children's futures.
Hillary Clinton may be the most corrupt person ever to seek the presidency of the United States.
And the week ended with the British vote to exit the European Union and Trump becoming part of the narrative because he was fielding questions from reporters in Scotland, where he was reopening his golf course, hours after the election results that stunned the world and forced the resignation of Britain's Prime Minister.
David Cameron said he didn't want to meet you.
Where is David Cameron right now?
Nicola Sturgeon wouldn't meet you. The Labour Party, Liberal, you're regarded as toxic.
No, I think what happened, I think we have, nasty guy.
Joining us now to analyze the campaign coverage, Lisa Booth, columnist for the Washington Examiner and a Republican strategist. Mara Liasson, NPR's national political correspondent and a Fox News contributor. And Michael Tomasky, columnist for the Daily Beast. Mara, Trump has gotten a tsunami of negative coverage for all the things I've just shown for another week, the meager fundraising, Corey Lewandowski. Does that coverage go too far?
You know, I think that Donald Trump would say that he has been able to counteract bad press in the media because he dominates social media. He's able to get his message out. And yes, he's got a tremendous amount of bad press. Some of it might go too far in terms of the kind of negative feeling overall towards Trump in the media. But there were a lot of things that Donald Trump said himself that were another series of self-inflicted wounds. You didn't have to say something negative about Donald Trump. You just had to report that he went to Scotland and said the dropping of the pound was a good thing for Turnberry because it would mean that a lot more people would come over from the United States. Or when asked, did he discuss this with his foreign policy advisors, he said there's nothing to talk about.
All right, we'll come back to Brexit, but on the financial front, Lisa, no one's saying that having $1 million in the bank is great news for a presidential candidate, but did the media recognize, for example, that Trump may not need $1 billion like a typical candidate?
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. If you look at the numbers, I think Hillary Clinton spent something like $220 million to take out Bernie Sanders with a staff of 700, and Donald Trump had less than 100 with, $50 million to defeat 16 candidates. But yeah, absolutely, that's not something they're talking about. But those numbers aren't good. I mean, look, I have worked for Senate candidates that have posted better numbers than that in a quarter, and he's running a national campaign to be president. So I think the criticism regarding the fundraising is fair. I do think that, adding some of that extra context as far as how much Hillary Clinton has spent to try to defeat someone like Bernie Sanders would be helpful, or at least, make it a little bit more balanced.
Michael Trump says, well, I may just fund the full campaign myself. There's a bit of media skepticism about that, but what do you make of this is now really the fourth straight week of a lot of negative coverage?
Well, he got about 4 months of really positive coverage. He got about 4 months of really
positive coverage during the primaries. You don't think it was mixed at least?
It was mixed, but what I'm referring to specifically is all the cable networks cutting to his speeches and covering his speeches and preempting regular programming and showing him for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, however long he wanted to talk. One company did this study. If you converted all that time, they added it up, and if you converted all that time to bought commercial time, it was worth $2 billion. So he got a lot of free coverage. He did fine for himself. He did. It wasn't all positive, but it was him standing there talking. He did fine for a while. Now, here's the problem. Now, the press, number one, feels a little bit bad about all that. And number two, they want him to prove that he can act like a president. And then his coverage will turn around.
Well, before we move on, so you're saying, and leaving aside the fact that a lot of that coverage was journalists questioning him, you're saying there's, as in sports, there's a little bit of a make-up call. The press felt it was too soft on Trump before and is now being a little...
That's just my gut, but yes, that's all right. That's just my gut.
All right. Now, firing a campaign manager a month before the convention, not a great thing. But what did you make of the leaks that came out of that normally tight-lipped campaign where it's Paul Manafort, the campaign chairman, who's now running the whole show? He had said it's me or Corey. That Ivanka had said I'm distancing myself from the campaign unless Lewandowski is out. What did you make of those leaks?
Well, it sounds like sometimes the Trump campaign itself can be as undisciplined as its candidate, because those were a lot of leaks. You even had Michael Caputo. He wasn't leaking. He tweeted, "Ding dong, the witch is dead." You know,
he's a volunteer who resigned hours later. Yeah.
Now he resigned hours later. But yeah, a lot of leaks made it sound like there was a lot of turmoil. But there was something else that did get a little bit of coverage, maybe should have gotten more, after Trump gave his blistering speech about Hillary Clinton, a comprehensive, cogent, whether it was based on conspiracy theories or facts. The point is, he finally did lay out the argument against Hillary Clinton, and that made a lot of Republicans feel better. He raised a lot of money. He raised like $3, $4, $5 million in a couple days.
Yeah, maybe he didn't get as much coverage because the media like insults rather than substance. But losing the campaign manager, it's not that uncommon in presidential politics. Al Gore had 3 campaign managers. So do you think the way it was portrayed as a catastrophe might have been a little overdone?
Well, it happens all the time, particularly at the moment where you go from a primary campaign to a general campaign. That's often the time that campaigns shed staff. They bring in new people because you're looking at a completely different kind of campaign environment. So you need someone that who's more experienced, running campaigns like Paul Manafort is. So I think it makes sense to shift from Corey to Paul. And I think the coverage of the firing sort of shows the bias in the media in itself. The amount of attention it got, especially at a time where you've got a former Hillary Clinton staffer who pled the Fifth over 150 times, new revelations regarding her email server and private emails, but yet somehow Donald Trump firing a campaign manager, which is standard operating procedure in campaigns, dominates the headlines. I mean, I think that in itself, the coverage that it got and the negative amount of attention that it got, it just shows the bias in the media.
You know, one other little thing, Corey Lewandowski is a character in and of himself. He's generated a lot of controversy in and of itself with the allegations that he manhandled a reporter.
But I think that was overblown as well.
It might have been, but now where every bit of controversy gets completely blown up, he was someone who people had a lot of interest in.
But controversies regarding him and not Hillary Clinton is the problem.
Right, but you're just saying that if it had been some sort of faceless campaign manager, then we might have moved on. All right, let's come back now to Trump being in Scotland, the Brexit vote. There he was to promote his golf course, but then he was in a position of trying to be the global statesman. He did get into it with a couple of reporters, including the British reporter who said he might be toxic. By and large, I would say there were negative reviews of Trump on that golf course. Fair or unfair?
Reasonable, I think. I mean, it was a really strangely timed trip. I mean, it's okay. He's still a businessman. He still owns golf courses. Go over there and promote your golf course. But the day of that vote, I don't know, that seemed really silly to me and really just incomprehensible. Maybe it was intentional, but if it was intentional, he at least could have done his homework to the extent of knowing, for example, how Scotland voted and not putting out that tweet that suggested that Scots were going crazy over this when they voted against it.
Usually when politicians, presidential candidates go abroad, they have meetings with local leaders. He didn't have any of that. He had Turnberry.
No, he didn't have any of that, but he used Brexit. He said that Brexit was another vindication for him. He fundraised off it. He said they're taking their country back just like we're going to take our country back. There's no doubt he pushed the narrative that there were parallels between Brexit and the U.S. campaign.
He wasn't the only one pushing that narrative. Lisa, the media, there have read a number of stories about this. Do you think there's a bit of an overreach here? I mean, it's a kind of a tempting story to draw a parallel between what happened in Britain, and Trump was pro-Brexit, unlike Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and most of the establishment U.S. politicians, and his own campaign, which has surprised so many people here, and whose supporters have often been attacked as being idiotic, as the pro-Brexit people, some of them were.
Well, I think, obviously you don't want to overplay the hand at all, and typically in the media we see things over-sensationalized. But, I mean, there are some parallels in the sense you've got, faceless bureaucrats in Brussels dictating everything from toasters to tea kettles, and, people in the United States feeling that there's been this heavy hand of federal overreach going into their everyday lives. So I think some of those parallels are similar, that anti-establishment sentiment, frustration with open borders, this feeling that, their country has gotten further away from, who they felt that, they should be as a nation.
So you think it's perfectly appropriate for the press to point out what you see as strong parallels?
Yeah, I think there's some parallels. I mean, does that mean anything for the November, for the general election? Probably not. Who knows? But I think some of the parallels that were being drawn, that's fair.
But, for every one of those stories, I read another one that said, wait a second, there are a lot of differences and it might not be direct. So I think the press coverage on this was pretty nuanced. Yeah.
All right. Well, our Fox News colleague George Will, longtime prize-winning syndicated columnist, made a little news, talked about it today on Fox News Sunday, saying that he's leaving the Republican Party. Let's take a look.
I left it for the same reason I joined it in 1964 when I voted for Barry Goldwater. I joined it because I was a conservative. I leave for the same reason that I'm a conservative.
Is this important in the sense of being symbolic, since George Will has been a very high-profile conservative commentator for decades?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, what percentage of Americans know George Will? And I don't say that to demean him, but, you know, it's just like...
He was on ABC for decades.
Yeah,
He's a pretty well-known guy.
That's true. Yeah, okay. So maybe a lot of people know the guy. And I think he's very well respected on Republicans and conservatives. So, yeah, I think once he says that, I think others say it, too.
And Will made no secret of the fact that he's doing this because of Donald Trump. He's telling the Republican Party, make sure Trump loses, don't give him money. Not saying that armies of people are going to follow him, but it certainly grabs your attention.
Shows you how disunified the Republican Party is. Conservative intellectuals, a lot of columnists. Will might be one of the most prominent among them, and he actually said he's leaving the party. But if you read Charles Krauthammer or Michael Gerson, I mean, pretty similar sentiments, and it just shows you that Trump hasn't unified the party. At
Real Donald Trump saying on Twitter, George Will, one of the most overrated political pundits who lost his way long ago. So punching back.
Yes, he is. Well, yeah, that's to be expected. Did anyone think he wasn't going to? But yeah, no, it certainly plays into this narrative of disunity in the Republican Party, which, you know, there obviously is some that's undeniable. And yeah, certainly when you have someone high profile like George Will or Charles Krauthammer, some people, conservatives, that a lot of Republicans respect, that does not send the right message, and it does end up hurting Donald Trump.
There is a real split in the GOP and in the conservative media, which we talk about here a lot. George Will, a latest example of that. All right, panel, we'll see you in a bit. When we